The early morning hours of an April day in the Hudson Valley, New York, were typically quiet, a stillness often broken only by the natural world. On this specific morning, however, that tranquility was shattered by a desperate call for assistance. At approximately 7:15 a.m., emergency services received a distress signal originating from a payphone in a small, nondescript town bordering the more secluded areas of the region. The caller identified herself as Elara Santos, a 25-year-old Filipina national, and reported having just escaped a prolonged period of unlawful confinement and systematic abuse. Her voice, though strained, conveyed a distinct urgency and clarity regarding her predicament, specifying the location of her captivity and the identity of her captor. Dispatch protocols were immediately activated. Given the severity of the allegations and the stated vulnerability of the caller, local law enforcement units were deployed to her reported location with an elevated priority. Within minutes, patrol officers arrived to find Ms. Santos, visibly distressed but coherent, awaiting their presence. She provided a preliminary account of her captivity, detailing the systematic isolation and control exerted by an individual identified as Arthur Finch, residing at a secluded estate approximately 30 miles distant. Ms. Santos further articulated that she had been held against her will for several months, her movements restricted, and her communication with the outside world severed. Her narrative included critical information regarding the confiscation of her personal identification documents, including her passport, and, significantly, the discovery of similar documents belonging to other individuals concealed within the perpetrator's residence. This initial report, corroborated by Ms. Santos's physical state and specific details, initiated a multi-agency response, marking the commencement of a complex investigation into potential human trafficking and severe assault. The immediate securing of Ms. Santos's safety became the primary objective, followed by the systematic verification of her claims and the identification of the alleged perpetrator. The case of Elara Santos transcended the typical parameters of domestic violence, revealing a meticulously constructed facade designed to ensnare and exploit. For many, the concept of the American dream represents opportunity and upward mobility. For Elara, an online courtship with Arthur Finch, an ostensibly successful retired executive residing in the scenic Hudson Valley, presented precisely that illusion. Digital communications spanning approximately 6 months prior to her arrival painted a picture of romance and financial security. Arthur Finch leveraged this perception, employing calculated gestures of generosity, sending gifts, providing flight tickets, and facilitating visa assistance to establish a veneer of genuine affection and benevolent intent. This carefully cultivated image, however, was a sophisticated instrument of deception. The online persona projected by Arthur Finch stood in stark contrast to the reality that would soon unfold. This disparity is why the case garnered significant investigative attention. It highlighted the insidious nature of transnational human trafficking, where romantic overtures can serve as a conduit for exploitation. The illusion of a loving relationship, meticulously crafted through digital interactions and material promises, masked a predatory design. Elara's journey from the Philippines to the United States was not a migration towards a better life, but a direct trajectory into a meticulously prepared environment of coercive control. The social media facade, depicting a life of comfort and partnership, ultimately shattered upon her arrival, replaced by systematic isolation and subjugation. This case underscored the critical vulnerability of individuals seeking economic advancement and personal connection through international online platforms, demonstrating how the American dream could be weaponized into a mechanism of entrapment and abuse. The initial weeks post-arrival, characterized by a brief honeymoon phase, further solidified the perpetrator's manipulative control, setting the stage for the systematic dismantling of Elara's autonomy. The investigation into the circumstances surrounding Elara Santos's escape necessitated a rigorous examination of the principal individuals involved: Elara Santos, the victim, and Arthur Finch, the perpetrator. Elara Santos, a 25-year-old Filipina national, presented as an individual driven by aspiration. Prior to her encounter with Arthur Finch, she was employed in a factory, a common pathway for economic stability in her home country. Her digital footprint indicated a consistent engagement with online platforms, often expressing hopes for a brighter future and a stable partnership. Her communication style was polite, deferential, and indicative of an individual seeking legitimate opportunities. Forensic analysis of her online interactions with Arthur Finch revealed a gradual progression from cautious optimism to a trusting engagement, influenced by Finch's consistent overtures and promises. Her resilience, evidenced by her meticulous planning and execution of escape, would later become a critical factor in the successful prosecution. Her physical presentation post-escape, including visible signs of trauma, provided immediate, tangible evidence corroborating her narrative. Arthur Finch, a 52-year-old American man, cultivated an image of a successful, retired executive. Public records and initial background checks revealed a history of business ventures and a seemingly comfortable lifestyle in the Hudson Valley, New York. His online presence was curated to project affluence, stability, and a refined demeanor. However, deeper investigative scrutiny uncovered a prior criminal record for violent offenses, a history meticulously concealed from his online acquaintances. This pattern of prior violent behavior, though initially undisclosed, provided a crucial context for understanding his subsequent actions. Finch's modus operandi involved leveraging his perceived status and financial resources to establish dominance and control. His communications with Elara, while initially charming and solicitous, exhibited subtle shifts towards possessiveness and monitoring approximately 90 days into their online correspondence. This established pattern, combined with forensic evidence later recovered from his residence, painted a consistent profile of a coercive and dangerous individual. The juxtaposition of his public persona with his private actions underscored a calculated and predatory methodology. The systematic subjugation of Elara Santos by Arthur Finch was not an impulsive act, but a calculated process, meticulously designed and executed over several months. The perpetrator's modus operandi began approximately 90 days into their online communication, long before Elara's physical arrival in the United States. During this period, Finch initiated subtle forms of coercive control. Digital communication logs revealed an increasing frequency of demands on Elara's time, coupled with inquiries into her social interactions and daily activities. These initial behaviors, often disguised as expressions of affection or concern, served to gradually erode Elara's autonomy and establish a baseline of compliance. Upon Elara's arrival at Arthur Finch's secluded Hudson Valley estate, the intensity of this control escalated. The initial honeymoon phase, lasting approximately 1 week, served to further disorient Elara and solidify Finch's benevolent facade. However, by the second week post-arrival, Finch systematically began isolating Elara. Her communication with family in the Philippines was subjected to increasing scrutiny and monitoring. Requests for privacy or independent contact were met with criticism and subtle threats. Crucially, during this period, Finch confiscated Elara's passport and other identification documents. This action was framed as a protective measure, citing concerns for her safety or the complexities of immigration paperwork, but its true purpose was to sever her legal identity and inhibit any attempt at independent travel or escape. The environment within the residence became increasingly restrictive. Elara's appearance was subjected to critical evaluation, further eroding her self-esteem. Access to the internet was limited, and her movements within the estate were closely observed. The systematic nature of these actions created an environment of constant surveillance and psychological pressure. This escalating pattern of control culminated on a Sunday evening, approximately 3 weeks after Elara's arrival. Following a minor perceived transgression, Arthur Finch perpetrated the initial act of physical violence against Elara. This event, documented by Elara's subsequent testimony and corroborated by later forensic findings, marked a critical turning point, transitioning the coercive control into overt physical abuse. The prior months of psychological manipulation had effectively isolated Elara, rendering her vulnerable to this escalating pattern of violence and confinement, thus completing the perpetrator's comprehensive control mechanism. The early morning hours of an April day marked a critical juncture in the investigation. At approximately 5:30 a.m., Arthur Finch departed his secluded Hudson Valley estate for what he had communicated to Elara Santos as an overnight business trip to New York City. This calculated absence, intended to maintain the illusion of a normal routine, inadvertently provided Elara with the precise temporal window required for her meticulously planned escape. By 7 a.m., Elara had successfully navigated the surrounding terrain, reaching a public area in a neighboring town. Her immediate action was to acquire a prepaid SIM card, activating the concealed mobile phone she had recovered months prior. The subsequent distress call to emergency services at 7:15 a.m. initiated a rapid law enforcement response. Patrol units from the local sheriff's office arrived at Elara's reported location within minutes. Her initial account, though delivered under duress, was remarkably coherent and detailed. She provided specific information regarding Arthur Finch, the address of the estate, and critically, the presence of other victims' identification documents within the residence. This intelligence immediately elevated the incident from a domestic dispute to a potential case of aggravated assault, unlawful confinement, and human trafficking. Elara was promptly transported to a secure facility where specialists from the New York State Police and a dedicated human trafficking task force commenced a formal debriefing. Her physical examination, conducted by forensic medical personnel, documented multiple contusions, abrasions, and evidence consistent with prolonged nutritional deprivation, providing objective corroboration to her narrative of systematic abuse. Concurrently, a tactical team was assembled. Given the secluded nature of Finch's estate and the potential for a hostile confrontation, a search warrant was swiftly obtained based on Elara's sworn testimony and the preliminary medical findings. Surveillance units were dispatched to establish a perimeter around the property, monitoring all ingress and egress points. The primary objective was to apprehend Arthur Finch safely and secure the potential crime scene. Arthur Finch, unaware of Elara's escape and the unfolding law enforcement operation, completed his purported business in New York City. Digital forensics would later confirm his movements during this period, establishing a timeline that placed him returning to the Hudson Valley later that evening. At approximately 8:45 p.m., as Finch's vehicle approached the entrance to his estate, it was intercepted by the waiting tactical team. Finch was apprehended without incident, exhibiting an initial demeanor of surprise and indignation. He was transported to the local precinct for interrogation. Initial questioning revealed a pattern of calculated obfuscation. Finch denied any wrongdoing, portraying Elara as a transient acquaintance who had willingly resided at his property. He asserted that her claims were fabricated, driven by a desire for financial gain or immigration status. He maintained that Elara had full freedom of movement and access to communication, a claim directly contradicted by the forensic medical evidence and Elara's detailed testimony. When confronted with the explicit allegation of passport confiscation, Finch attempted to rationalize the action as a safekeeping measure, citing concerns about Elara's unfamiliarity with U.S. laws. The interrogators, trained in detecting deception and coercive control tactics, systematically dissected his narrative. They focused on inconsistencies in his statements regarding Elara's movements, her access to funds, and the precise duration of her stay. This initial interrogation established Finch's intent to mislead and control the narrative, setting the stage for a more comprehensive investigation into his activities and the evidence within his residence. The 36-hour period from Elara's escape to Finch's apprehension and initial questioning provided critical insights into the perpetrator's psychology and laid the groundwork for the forensic examination that would follow. The apprehension of Arthur Finch marked the transition to an intensive multi-agency investigation, meticulously designed to uncover the full scope of his criminal enterprise. Following Finch's arrest, a warrant-backed forensics team initiated a systematic processing of his secluded Hudson Valley estate. The property, initially appearing as a well-maintained residence, soon yielded a trove of incriminating evidence. The primary residence was methodically documented and searched. Investigators discovered reinforced locks on internal doors and windows and a sophisticated network of covert surveillance cameras strategically placed throughout the interior and exterior. Digital forensic specialists immediately seized all electronic devices, computers, external hard drives, mobile phones, and network routers. Analysis of these devices would later reveal a meticulously maintained digital archive of Elara Santos's communications, including intercepted messages to her family and a browsing history indicative of extensive research into human trafficking methodologies and surveillance technologies. GPS data extracted from Finch's personal vehicle and a concealed tracking device found within Elara's sparse belongings corroborated her account of restricted movement, demonstrating how her excursions outside the property were consistently monitored or orchestrated by Finch. A critical breakthrough occurred during the examination of a locked study within the residence. Utilizing specialized tools, forensic technicians accessed a hidden compartment behind a bookshelf. Inside, they discovered a collection of personal effects, multiple passports, various forms of identification, and financial documents belonging to at least 4 other women, all of Southeast Asian origin. These documents, consistent with Elara's earlier testimony, provided tangible proof of Finch's pattern as a serial predator. The names on these documents immediately triggered cross-referencing with national and international missing persons databases, initiating parallel investigations into the fates of these individuals. Simultaneously, forensic medical examinations of Elara Santos provided crucial physical evidence. Her medical report detailed scarring consistent with long-term ligatures, multiple healed fractures indicative of prior physical trauma, and chronic signs of malnutrition. Trace evidence collected from her clothing and person, including microscopic fibers and DNA samples, was meticulously cataloged for comparison against samples obtained from the estate and Arthur Finch. While no other deceased victims were immediately identified on the property, the discovery of multiple identification documents strongly suggested a broader network of past victims, some of whom remained unaccounted for. This prompted a deeper dive into cold cases involving missing women who fit a similar profile, particularly those who had entered the country via specific visa categories. Further investigation into Arthur Finch's background revealed a meticulously constructed facade. While his public persona suggested a successful retired executive, a deeper federal criminal records check uncovered a history of violent offenses, including 2 prior convictions for aggravated assault and 1 for unlawful restraint, spanning over 2 decades in different states. These records had been effectively sealed or obscured through legal maneuvering and the use of various aliases. His true identity, confirmed through biometric data and fingerprint analysis, revealed a pattern of relocating after each conviction, establishing new identities and perpetuating his predatory cycle. The systematic accumulation of evidence, from the physical layout of the confinement, the digital trail of control, the corroboration of Elara's injuries, to the discovery of other victims' documents and Finch's concealed criminal past, painted an undeniable picture of premeditated abuse and human trafficking. The investigation's rigor ensured that Arthur Finch's elaborate system of deception was thoroughly dismantled, leaving no room for doubt regarding his culpability. The overwhelming accumulation of forensic evidence, coupled with Elara Santos's compelling testimony, constructed an irrefutable case against Arthur Finch. Following his arrest and comprehensive investigation, grand jury indictments were secured. Finch was formally charged with federal offenses including human trafficking, forced labor, and sex trafficking via fraud and coercion, unlawful confinement, aggravated assault, identity theft related to the confiscated passports, and obstruction of justice. Additional state charges for assault and battery were also filed. During the pre-trial phase, Arthur Finch maintained his innocence, entering a plea of not guilty to all charges. His defense strategy centered on discrediting Elara, portraying her as a willing participant now seeking financial gain or immigration benefits. Defense counsel filed numerous motions to suppress evidence, challenging the legality of the search warrant and the admissibility of digital forensics. Each motion was systematically denied, citing the robust legal basis for the search and meticulous chain of custody. Bail was denied given the severity of the charges, Finch's prior violent record, and the demonstrated risk of flight and witness tampering. The trial commenced several months later in a federal district court. The prosecution presented a methodical case, carefully introducing each piece of evidence. Digital forensics experts testified to the surveillance systems, intercepted communications, and GPS data tracking Elara's restricted movements. Forensic medical examiners detailed Elara's injuries and their consistency with systematic abuse. Crucially, the prosecution presented the passports and identification documents of the 4 other women found in Finch's hidden compartment, along with evidence from ongoing investigations that linked Finch to these individuals, some of whom had been reported missing. Elara Santos provided extensive testimony over several days. Her account was delivered with a quiet resolve, detailing the systematic psychological manipulation, the confiscation of her documents, the escalating physical violence, and her strategic planning for escape. Her direct, factual recounting, supported by the objective evidence, starkly contrasted with Finch's denials. The jury, presented with the irrefutable evidence and Elara's credible testimony, deliberated for less than 48 hours. Arthur Finch was found guilty on all counts. The sentencing phase followed, with the prosecution requesting the maximum penalties, emphasizing Finch's history of violence and the predatory nature of his crimes. The court considered victim impact statements from Elara and families of other identified victims. In a decisive ruling, Arthur Finch was sentenced to a cumulative term of 85 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. This sentence reflected the gravity of his offenses, affirming the systematic cruelty inflicted and providing justice for Elara and his other victims. The case of Arthur Finch and Elara Santos serves as a stark illustration of the intricate mechanisms employed in modern human trafficking, particularly within the context of international online relationships. It underscores the critical vulnerability of individuals seeking economic opportunity and genuine connection across borders, demonstrating how meticulously crafted online personas can mask predatory intentions. The sociological lesson is clear. Coercive control, often preceding overt violence, functions by systematically isolating victims, eroding their autonomy, and severing their ties to external support. This process is not instantaneous, but a gradual, deliberate erosion of self, making escape profoundly challenging. This case offers a potent warning regarding the red flags inherent in overly rapid relationship progression, demands for financial control, and efforts to isolate individuals from their support networks. It highlights the necessity for vigilance in digital interactions and the critical importance of verifying identities and intentions. Moreover, it emphasizes the indispensable role of robust investigative protocols, forensic science, and interagency cooperation in dismantling such complex criminal enterprises. Elara Santos's survival and her courage in testifying stands as a testament to human resilience. Her strategic actions, combined with the rigorous application of forensic science, ensured that Arthur Finch's systematic cruelty was exposed and legally affirmed, providing a measure of justice and a powerful cautionary tale against the hidden dangers lurking beneath deceptive digital facades.